Welcome to our episode today. We are really excited to take a closer look at the topic of language, fear, and science in the yoga world, in the yoga studio, in yoga classes. And this tends to be like a theme that Travis and I kind of weave in on maybe a low level throughout much of what we talk about in our work together. But today we really wanted to pull this topic out and focus on it in a more directed and thorough manner, because just as a standalone topic, there's so much there that we could dive into. And in order to do that today, we are super excited to have invited a very special guest on the podcast today. And our guest's name is Matthew Huy. And he is a longtime yoga teacher who's from the US, but he's based in the UK. And he teaches anatomy and physiology for many yoga teacher training programs, both in the United Kingdom and internationally. He's really great at what he does. He also recently finished his master's degree in health and exercise science at Brunel University in London. So congratulations, Matt. We're super proud of you and excited for that huge accomplishment. Matt is also the co-author of a brand new book that just released that's called The Physiology of Yoga. We're super excited about this new offering. And he has co-written this book with Dr. Andrew McGonigal, who's also another really great educator and content creator out there that you should know about. And also, Andrew and Matt are both contributing together a couple of articles from my blog on common misconceptions about physiology in the yoga world. So we're really excited about those coming out as well. But the main reason that we have Matt here today, the main reason is that for his master's dissertation from the program he just graduated from, his dissertation was specifically on language, fear, and science in the yoga studio. So that's the specific topic that we've invited him on to talk about today. I'm super excited about his dissertation because, as we mentioned, like this is a theme that we kind of touch on throughout a lot of our content. But this is the first time I've ever seen like a true like research-based resource really take a look at it, like a look at yoga safety and at fear-based language that tends to be semi-prevalent in the yoga world. So with all of that said, we're so excited to welcome you here today. And Matt, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. Absolutely. And it's a big honor of mine, especially because I've been following you for so long, Jenni, and I still remember that first article I read from you by Yoga International, introducing the idea of Davis's law and how our connective tissue adapts to the demands placed on it. And for me, that was just kind of mind blowing at the time. And I'd never taught, or I'd never learned through my years of yoga teaching and trainings and that sort of thing, that our body actually adapts to the demands placed on it. So yeah, ever since then, yeah, I've always loved your content, and it's a great podcast that you and Travis offer here, especially with Travis's expertise in rehabilitation and injuries and that sort of thing, and being a PhD. That's just brilliant. So thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for saying that. I'm super honored that you consider some of the work that I put out there to have been influential, and that some of these concepts like that now you totally know so well and teach all the time, that like some of them maybe you learned for the first time through some of those things. So thank you. I'm super honored.
Yeah.
Matt,
Yeah,
I want to ask, given your experience with teaching other yoga teachers and your personal experience with being only exposed to some of those concepts that you said for the first time from Jenni, like, what do you think about the yoga world in general's kind of understanding of the science of the body? Like, does the yoga world need to shape up in terms of the improving scientific literacy? And just what do you feel is the current pulse there?
Yeah. Well, it's hard to say no to that, right? Should we be more clued up on science? Yes, absolutely. So, I think up until recently, if you look at the previous publications on yoga anatomy and that sort of thing, very few of them have references, or cite scientific articles or the scientific knowledge that we have available to us. And this is changing with, of course, like Jules Mitchell's book
Mm-hmm.
And Bernie Clark's, he has tons of references in his, and our book is full of references. In fact, we didn't really create any of the content. We just put together what others are saying in a way
Mm-hmm.
about the latest research on yoga and the different systems of the body. And so I think things are changing, and we're becoming, as yoga teachers collectively, more clued up towards science. And I think that's only a good thing, because uh, through science we can uh, become better yoga teachers. We can really become more confident teachers, and we can understand the workings of the body even better. And there's this beautiful balance of philosophy and science. There's a reason that
Mm-hmm.
PhD is short for Doctor of Philosophy. So philosophy
I
doctor.
love that.
Yeah, and science and philosophy very much do meld together, and science and yoga can meld together really beautifully. It's not like by looking at yoga scientifically that we are disregarding the traditional teachings of it at all. In fact, quite the opposite. For example, I was in a private yoga class this morning, and uh, I was asking my client, so how are you feeling after the sun salutations? And she said, yeah, I can feel my energy flowing now, right? And now that sounds a bit esoteric, a bit poetic, my energy flowing. Then we can look at it from a scientific point of view. Like, as you move more and you warm up more, your circulation is going to increase, your blood vessels will dilate, they'll increase blood flow, increased heart rate, that sort of thing. And energy is also glucose that's transported through the blood. So her feeling of increased energy reflects the fact that her blood flow is increasing, or circulation, and she has more glucose available to her. So kind of you can have a poetic way of saying something scientific. So I don't think at all that they are mutually exclusive, and scientific knowledge of yoga can help inform the philosophy also.
I love that you pointed that out, because I definitely do tend to see that trend sometimes where people do kind of see science and yoga, or science and spirituality, as like in this dichotomous relationship or a binary relationship, and that like that you can't that having more of one necessarily cancels out the other, or that they work against one another somehow. And I just really don't see it that way. I think you described and explained that so well. To me, it seems like science in general, but specifically science of the human body, like we're all living in these bodies, and there's so much that goes on, especially with all of the processes and subsystems of the body, that so many of us are totally unaware of. Like we've never learned about that. I mean, really, it could be like a lifelong journey in learning about all of that, I realize.
Mm,
But I feel like, because at least for me, one of the aims of a yoga practice is to cultivate more self knowledge and self connection. To me, it seems like studying the science of the body really helps me in that goal, helps me facilitate that goal. And it doesn't, to me, seem like I become less connected to myself or something because I like to study anatomy, physiology, biomechanics, things like that. If anything, it just
mm.
helps bolster that connection. So I feel like
And
that's, yes, please.
yeah, and it teaches us to be grateful for this organism we have. It's an amazing organism that's keeping us alive and letting us move through our day, helping us get what we want, and help us do our yoga practice. And it's amazing, all these, as you said, subsystems or little things going on, physiological processes to help us achieve these outcomes. Even things like burping, if you will. So when I teach on a teacher training program, I'll ask the to be yoga teachers about something interesting about their body. Could be like they've had an ACL reconstruction or something else. And one person, who shall remain anonymous, said that they cannot burp. And at first you might think, oh
Oh,
well, that's great, Then you don't have to worry about uh, I don't know, any rudeness at the
social
table or
awkwardness.
something.
Hmm.
However, as a result, this ends up creating lots of digestive problems,
Oh,
uh, and she basically has uh, gas building up in her digestive system, and things like champagne are completely off limits, pretty much.
right.
So even this process of burping, which you wouldn't think is that necessary, perhaps, is actually an
Hmm.
essential part of our physiology. And so it can make you really appreciate these amazing things that your body is doing.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really quite an incredible thing. Even burping.
I love that.
I,
Like
yeah,
that
I
they
didn't realize anyone couldn't burp. That poor
Yeah,
boy.
and of course there's a name for it,
Sure.
oh
A
some
whatever it's called.
right.
Yes.
But
You
who
can
would have
Google
thought?
that.
Yeah,
Uh,
something that just seems like kind of trivial is actually important. And it just shows maybe how intentional so many of these processes and ways that our body works really are. I mean, there's so much magic there. And if anything, I think science can help us see that more.
yeah.
And when it comes to things like scientific literacy, I mean, I think we all, and probably our whole audience, is aware of the fact that probably just in general, our society could all use to increase its scientific literacy. I feel like in Travis's and my experience, it does seem like the yoga world is maybe even could use more, like more of that. Um, I'm wondering if, Matt, we've talked about how in your experience in having learned in yoga teacher training programs, even when they have say an anatomy and physiology section in them, I'm kind of generalizing just teacher training programs in general, but like they are required to have like a certain amount, maybe it's 20 hours of anatomy and physiology. What have you found to be like some of the content in the varying programs that you've taken? Like, have they been super concrete, actual sciencey anatomy, physiology, or has it been something else?
Yeah. Well, first of all, as far as I know, most countries, or at least I should speak for perhaps the UK and the
Mm,
US, don't have licensing bodies for yoga teachers, of course, right?
right.
Which means, therefore, that any training can be a yoga teacher training, really. You don't have to have 20 hours of anatomy and physiology. And you could do, a 1 day training and say, okay, everyone who comes to my 1 day training is now a yoga teacher, right? You might have a problem getting liability insurance, but nonetheless, you could say
Hmm.
I'm running a teacher training, right? So obviously there are some bodies set up to try to create some standards like Yoga Alliance, uh,
Hmm.
and so their requirement is to have about 20, though I think they've increased it to basically 30 hours of anatomy and physiology, and they have made it a little bit more, should I say, rigorous or robust in terms of what they expect you to teach. But previously it was quite vague, and I think even, or I know, things like energetics and chakras were allowed to be part
Hmm.
of the anatomy and physiology component of a teacher training. And I'm not at all saying chakras should not be taught.
Hmm.
Absolutely. I think, if that's an important part of the lineage, then it should definitely be taught. But it's not within the remit of the scientific lens, especially since they're not dissectable, observable things. And science
Hmm.
is the study of observable phenomena. In fact, there's maybe you've heard of this Russell's teapot. So this idea that Bertrand Russell, the philosopher, came up with this. That he said, I can make the claim that there is an invisible teapot, or a very small teapot, orbiting the sun between Earth and Mars, but it's so small that no telescopes could pick it up, or no measuring devices of any kind could pick it up. But you can make that claim, right? Like, there's this thing, but it's invisible, so you won't be able to see it. But the burden of proof should be on you to prove that thing, and you shouldn't expect others to believe you if it cannot be observable,
Right.
right? And
That's right.
so perhaps it's the same with chakras. And I sort of think there might be some truth to it. I feel like some things stirring in my chest at times, so maybe that's a chakra. But it's not really within the scientific remit. So, uh,
That's so
and
true.
so speaking of scientific literacy, and if we're expecting to increase scientific literacy, then there do need to be some limits as to what we teach, and boundaries. Yeah.
So it can't just be like some person's opinion,
Right.
which I think maybe we could talk about that. So like the hierarchy of scientific evidence and kind of what you
Hmm.
said earlier, like a lot of times the teachings are based on people's opinions without kind of very concrete references to scientific literature. And so it's not to say that expert opinion doesn't hold any weight, but when we think about comparing expert opinion to things like more rigorously designed studies or studies of studies, which we call systematic reviews or meta-analyses, like, can you talk about kind of that pyramid and what yogis or yoga teachers should know about what constitutes higher quality evidence?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is an interesting thing to learn about. So the hierarchy of evidence, as you called it, or the pyramid of evidence, and at the top you have systematic reviews. And so a systematic review will be conducted by normally a team of researchers, and they'll trawl through all of the scientific literature available on a certain topic. And so there's certain scientific databases that you can look through, like of course Google Scholar, Scopus, Discuss. There are quite a few. And within their systematic review, the authors would uh, talk about which or name which databases they look through and which keywords they use. So we
Mm-hmm.
might look, for example, at yoga and injuries or adverse
Mm-hmm.
events, for example, and then find all of the studies that looked at yoga and injuries, stroke adverse events. Um, and then from there, compare the data and see what those found, and uh, come to some conclusions. So that is a systematic review. It is systematized. You have to go through you have to go through lots of studies. It's a lot of work. And I was thinking of doing this for my dissertation, and
Mm.
thankfully my advisor said, "Why don't you do a coaching resource instead?" Which was a big relief. So
Smart.
that's at the top of the pyramid, and that's considered like the highest level of evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but of course, if scientists sometimes say, if you put garbage in, you get garbage out. So
Mm-hmm.
if all of the studies going into the systematic review are garbage, then the systematic review will be garbage. But hopefully, the systematic review will find that and say that we found that all of the studies to date are of low quality, and therefore
Mm-hmm.
no firm conclusions can be drawn. Okay, so that's a systematic review. And then below that, at the top of the pyramid, would be randomized controlled trials, which you've probably heard of. This is where
Mm-hmm.
people are split up into two groups randomly. Some are given an intervention, that could be yoga or a pill, of course. And then the other group given a placebo or treatment as usual or something like that. And then you compare the results, right? So that's obviously considered a high level of evidence. There's some problems with that. Like, you cannot blind someone to the fact that they're doing yoga, right?
Right.
Obviously. So it's hard to take out the other confounding variables, and even the contextual factors. Like, just thinking that I'm going to be doing yoga and exercise might make me feel better rather than the yoga itself, right? So we have these confounding variables. It's hard
Mm-hmm.
to do a randomized control trial on yoga. And then below that, you have cohort studies where you have two groups of people, perhaps with the same characteristics, um, case control, case series, case reports. So that's when someone presents to say a hospital or a doctor or something with some weird thing, and these are really useful. Like, let's say, for example, uh, someone comes in with this new cough, right? And then the
Mm-hmm.
doctor says, well, this is a little bit of a different cough than I've seen before, and then they find it's the strain of COVID or whatever, right? So there's certainly a place for case reports where it can build on evidence, and we can do more group trials and that sort of thing. But that is lower on the evidence pyramid. And then the bottom, depending on which pyramid you're looking at, are editorials, expert opinions, um, and then maybe even below that you could say is anecdote, which is basically just two people telling a story, or you telling a story to someone else. Like, I did yoga and my knee got better, and
Right.
and it's great to think that yoga helped your knee, but it could have been something else, or it could have been just
Mm-hmm.
over time that you've gotten better. As if you have an injury, you're likely to heal from it. You two have mentioned this on your podcast before, like regression to the mean, natural history. So the natural progression of a injury is that it usually gets better, musculoskeletal injury. So as you go up the pyramid, the evidence quality should get better. That's the idea. And the bias should get lower as you go up the pyramid. Okay.
Right.
Um, but even still, there's, the top of the pyramid relies on better quality of evidence at the bottom. And there are even some scientists who have disagreed with this research pyramid. For example, qualitative research has become much more popular in the last 30 years. Uh, Qualitative research is where you're basically analyzing words as opposed to numbers. So quantitative research is really useful for studying something like, can yoga lower blood pressure? So you take people's blood pressure,
Mhm.
you have them do a course of yoga, take the blood pressure afterwards, and obviously you should make it, really systematized and, make sure you do it properly and rigorous and all that stuff, follow certain protocols. But then those numbers will give you an indication of whether yoga can help reduce blood pressure. Whereas a qualitative research would be, okay, so you've been doing yoga for 5 years. How does it make you feel? And that's it. And you record lots of transcripts and you transpose those transcripts and you analyze them. And it takes a lot of time, but there's a lot of really interesting information that can come from qualitative research that cannot come from quantitative research. For example, low back pain, specifically non-specific low back pain. That's where a specific anatomical cause cannot be found for back pain. And amazingly, this accounts for about 85% of cases of low back pain.
Right.
So you're much less likely to have back pain as a result of a herniated disc or something more serious than you are just this general non-specific low back pain. Even under imaging, you can't find anything specific. So, but through qualitative research, we've learned, okay, there are lots of factors that affect back pain, including psychosocial factors like how are you feeding in yourself, what's going on in your love life, what's going on with your boss, with your work life, how are you sleeping? People who are clinically depressed have a higher occurrence of pain, both low back pain and other places. So qualitative research has helped us to understand about this idea or this phenomenon of non-specific low back pain much better than quantitative research could have. So that was a very long way of going about the of the hierarchy of evidence, but I think that gives you an idea of how complex it is. And quite often, you hear someone say, "Oh, I heard about a study that found this." In our book, we talk about a made-up study called, or in the New Yoga Times, where entitled "Bananas Cure Cancer," and it's a fake article talking about how a new study was conducted on mice about how bananas affected cancer cells in a laboratory, something like that. And so we dissect that article and talk about how this may or may not apply to humans and the problems with it. But the issue is that quite often we'll hear something like this on the radio or from a friend, and then come to the conclusion, okay, I need to eat bananas. Bananas cure cancer. That's going to be the key to do. Whereas quite often the findings of science are that things are really complex. Physiology is incredibly complex, much more complex than physics, where if you throw a ball, it will land, and you can pretty much predict where it's going to land. Physiology is affected by so many factors, including hormones, mood, your social factors, and that sort of thing. So
yeah, so I think that speaks to like when you read something on the internet about yoga and it interviews a couple of yoga teachers and then they make claims without scientific citations to anything, let alone high quality systematic reviews of high quality randomized controlled trials. Or when you read in your book, your anatomy book that's been assigned in your teacher training, where there are no references, this is not science, or this is not scientifically founded. This is often based on expert opinion or anecdote, like you mentioned. And we should have less confidence in those, any conclusions that are coming from those resources.
Yeah. But anecdote certainly has its place, and I mean, anecdote may have been where someone started saying, one doctor spoke to another doctor maybe in the 60s and said, I've noticed my patients who come in and they smoke, they're more likely to have lung cancer. That could have been the start of research, which we now quite firmly know smoking increases significantly your risk of lung cancer, right?
Yeah.
But so it has its place.
Yeah, it's not, in the absence of other high quality evidence, we can go down the pyramid. But when there are high quality studies on something like you mentioned earlier, injuries in yoga, we should rely on those higher quality or higher tiers of evidence, as opposed to some person said that they see a lot of injuries in their yoga students.
Yeah.
And I feel like
Exactly.
that's like proliferated to the point where the general public believes things about yoga injuries that, you know, your research or your research of other research has shown as not to be the case.
Yeah. Yeah, and as a yoga teacher, then you start to become fearful if you hear about all these injuries happening as a result of yoga. And I think we've
Mm-hmm.
moved beyond this, but you know, William Broad with the New York Times had his famous
Mm-hmm.
article talking about the dangers of yoga, a few of them, and then his book. And actually, that has prompted the research on yoga injuries. So a really important researcher is Holger Kramer, and
Mm-hmm.
he's done a few of the studies that I'm sure we'll mention later on the safeness of yoga. And I emailed him actually to say thank you, like thanks for your
You
research.
did?
Without
You
Oh,
did?
I did,
I
and he
love that.
Did
responded.
he write you back?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, and that's the great thing about a lot of scientists I find will respond if you just say thank you.
I
You know,
I try to do
because
that too. If I
yeah,
come across something that I find really profound and really important, I try to let them know, because otherwise, how would they know?
yeah,
So
exactly.
And
true.
so,
They just
sometimes they write you back, and sometimes they don't.
yeah, but
But
he
they
wrote
usually do.
back.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah. And I asked him also in my email, I said, you know, so was the Broad article in 2013 a
Yes.
catalyst for you to start doing this
Yes.
research? And he said, yes. He
Oh,
said
Oh
that
wow!
along with the media attention that came from it, you know,
Right.
right. What
because
proliferated?
yeah, you can have a very catchy newspaper article that says yoga can kill you, right? Like I'm going to read that as opposed
Yep.
to yoga is quite safe. Well, who's going to read
Or
that?
or
That's
yo-
boring.
or yoga could kill you, but it probably won't, and it's probably fairly safe. Like that kind of hedging your bets. Like, I'm not going to read that. That doesn't sound as fun,
Yeah, exactly.
even if that's
That
Exactly.
the honest truth.
For our listeners
Yeah.
who may not be familiar with the William Broad article, what do you remember what the title of it was, Matt? And it's from like you said 2013. It was, I think it was like how yoga can wreck your body, wasn't it? Something like
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
Isn't it
How
that?
yoga can
Yeah.
wreck your body. That's
And
right.
I love
Hmm.
how you point out, like, I think human nature, and really it's probably adaptive. We've evolved this way, but we just tend to pay attention to things that are negative, things that like cause the danger alarm to come up versus things that are positive. Like you said, if a whole article comes out in the New York Times, like yoga is pretty safe, like that's just not that interesting. People aren't
Yeah.
really going to notice that and be like, what? But they'll notice if it's how yoga can wreck your body. And I think it even has this image, and we know image can be like what we see can be such a powerful input, but the image is like several people in like these pretzel like shapes or
Oh yeah.
something like that. Do you know? Like, I think that was
Yeah.
One
like
of them, I
published with
think
the
one might have
article.
been in shoulder stand too, which we talked about on our
Oh yeah, like a
like a couple
couple.
episodes ago.
And I actually
Yeah.
remember, I was just thinking, because when I was reading your dissertation, Matt, and you wrote about that article, I had a flashback to when I was teaching yoga at that time back in Santa Barbara when I lived there. I literally had a yoga student, and she was amazing and super regular. And she also, I must add, is a professor. So to me, that shows like it was like in English literature or something. So not this type of science we're talking about, but like she's super educated. But she read that article, it came out at that time, and it scared her so much that she told me she was going to stop coming to
Oh my
class
gosh.
because she was like, I read that article and now I'm afraid that I'm going to like tear my rotator cuff and blah blah blah. Like it literally scared her out of my class because of that article.
Case in point.
There's
Yeah.
an anecdote for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and that's sad, you know, because that's someone not doing yoga. And hopefully she went on to
Yeah.
do some other form of exercise to keep herself healthy. But
Something safer like soccer, football, That's a
You're
joke.
actually,
kidding because,
Travis,
yeah.
I don't know if you know this, Travis, but those actually have a higher injury rate. I don't know if you looked at that on your
Yes.
PhD, but
Yeah. Well, and I think that surprises people, right? Like, because, well, maybe American football, everybody knows that's dangerous. But like soccer is one of the most popular, if not the most popular sports in the world, and I don't think people are afraid of recreationally playing soccer because
Mm-mm.
maybe some people are, but it doesn't seem to like put fear into people's eyes the way that like these articles do about yoga. And it's like the science doesn't
Totally.
support the like that yoga is so much more dangerous than anything else, because it's not, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you write
Yeah.
about
And
that really
Broad,
well. I'm sorry.
yeah, it was sorry. Broad picked up on just like a few case studies or that appeared in
Mm-hmm.
the scientific literature, two of them from the 70s. But and
Wow.
so yes, like it is possible that an injury can occur from yoga,
Mm-hmm.
but or it can occur at the time that someone is doing yoga, which is not necessarily to say that it's the cause of yoga. And you guys talked
Yeah.
about that on your injury episode also. It's
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
just that that could be the culminating event, or that could be it was going to happen anyway. You know,
Yeah.
someone
So
was going to injure themselves anyway.
that would be an example of cherry picking, right? Where you
Right.
find things to support your claim, even though, you can always find two case studies or two articles, but then you're not considering the overwhelming, all the other articles that would outweigh those two articles, because you just, we're not going to talk about all of the instances where yoga didn't have adverse events. We're going to pick these two from 50 years ago and
Yeah.
scare you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Confirmation bias, which is
Yeah.
a
Yes.
psychological term. And Jenny, you were talking about how we focus on the negative. That's called negativity bias. You
Mm.
as yoga teachers, we might get leaving our class 20 people saying, oh, that was a great class, I really enjoyed it, but then one person says,
Right.
oh, I didn't love that. And of course that's the one that's going to stick in your mind, and you're going to ruminate on it
Always.
probably. So that's that negativity bias. Some people probably even more prone to thinking that way than others, of course.
Absolutely.
Well,
That's a great example. Well, thank you for kind of outlining for us, both here and also in your dissertation, just kind of what scientific research actually does suggest about the prevalence of yoga injury, and that on the whole, yoga isn't really any less safe than so many other physical activities, and is probably more safe than most of them. And thanks for highlighting the researcher Kramer, because he does seem, I mean, I know there have been other researchers who have looked at this as well, but his work seems to be particularly important in this realm.
yeah.
So you
Shout
write
out to
about this.
Holger.
Yeah, exact to Holger. Yeah, Holger Kramer. We're big fans.
Yeah.
So you clearly outlined that yoga isn't as dangerous as is often portrayed, especially like in the media. I feel like this could tie us into an important topic that you write about in your dissertation also, which is the topic of nocebo, which is something that some of our listeners may be familiar with, but it does seem like that's not like super common knowledge. Like many more people are familiar with placebo versus nocebo. Could you maybe talk to us about like define that term and give us some examples?
Yeah. Well, they would be familiar with it if they read Jenny Rawlings' articles on her blog. Honestly,
That's
Keep,
very
keep
that's
up,
where I
listeners.
first heard about it.
that's where you first heard about it, was one of my articles.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, this is well
Yes.
before my master's, right? So this is probably like, I don't know, 5 years ago or something.
I
Yeah, and I
can't
was like, oh
believe
my God,
it.
this is a thing. So as I share it now, maybe someone else's mind will light up and realize, oh, this is a thing. Okay, so as you said, we know that placebo response,
Hmm.
um, and placebo comes from the Latin placare, which means to appease or to please. And so placebo is a first person conjugation. So it literally means I will appease or I will please. And
Wow.
the placebo effect is basically the effect that we see, a positive effect from an inert substance. So, I was talking about the randomized controlled trials before, and this is seen all the time in randomized controlled trials where you give someone a sugar pill or a starch pill, and starch is found everywhere. It's found in your broccoli, and so it's not going to have any effect on your body really, and yet people take this pill and feel better. Their
Right.
symptoms decrease, their back pain goes away or whatever, and so that's called the placebo response. And the placebo effect is basically the difference between the placebo and no treatment, right? So the placebo effect. So
Right.
then we
Right.
have the nocebo, which comes from Latin nocere or nocere. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. And that is to harm. So nocebo is the first person conjugation, literally meaning I will harm. And what we see here is someone is given a sugar pill or starch pill. So they're given a placebo, and they start having negative feelings. They start or negative symptoms, um,
Mm-hmm.
adverse events. So some of the most common ones are headaches, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, dizziness, tingling in the hands, So it's not like taking a pill is going to cause you to break a bone or something like that, right?
Right,
But
right.
it can have these huge psychological effects on the body. And here's a really interesting statistic from Benedetti, I think 2007, that was a systematic review on nocebo, on the nocebo effect. And they found that 1 out of 5 patients in a placebo group had to drop out of the trial because of intolerance to the drug. Okay. So let me spell out what that means. So in other words, you're in a placebo group, right? So you're getting a sugar pill or starch pill or something, and you have to drop out because your symptoms, your side effects are so bad, and yet you're taking nothing, and that happens to 1 out of 5. 20% of people drop out of studies according to this systematic review because of because of the symptoms that result of because of this nocebo. And we've had lots of other interesting studies that look at the nocebo response or the pain response in relation to expectation. Like one that I cited in my dissertation is people with low back pain being shown an image of someone stooping over to pick something up, to pick up a suitcase, for example. So they rounded their back and they bent. So first of all, I should say, okay, you had, I think it was 11 people with low back pain, 11 people without back pain. They were put into an MRI and they were shown images. One image was just a man standing next to a suitcase. And for everyone, there was basically no response. They didn't feel anything, and nothing really lit up in their brain outside of just looking at a picture, right? No feelings. And then the next image they showed was this man stooping over to pick up this suitcase. So back rounded. And what's fascinating is so 100% of the people with low back pain experienced discomfort in their body upon being shown this image. And I think it was 4 or more experienced actual back pain. So not just feeling uncomfortable, but actual back pain just by being shown this image. Versus the control group, people without the back pain, they basically had no response. And then finally, because they were in
lying in an MRI machine, so they weren't moving.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. They were not moving. No, not at all. And then finally, because they were in an MRI, the scientists were able to look at what was happening in the brain, and the pathways that you would expect to light up for pain did light up for the people with chronic non-specific low back pain, but it didn't light up for the people without back pain. So images can create pain or expectations of pain. There have been other really interesting studies where people are put into a sham stimulator. So think of like a 1960s hair dryer, that you go to the hairdresser for, and they put this hair dryer over your head. So there have been studies where they put that over a person's head. They show them a knob, like from 1 to 10, and they turn up the knob and they say, we're going to stimulate your brain. And people have to stop the study or they leave with headaches, but it's all sham. Like nothing is connected. There's no electricity going through. It's purely our expectation. So those things can be seen as our nocebo response, our expectation to pain and how it translates to pain. And this is, that idea of it's all in your head, but actually this is translating into the body. Like these people are really feeling pain and adverse effects. So the idea of it's in your head is it's kind of dismissing that, but we need to appreciate that people in pain and these potential triggers to pain create real, genuine pain in those people, right? So I tied this to yoga in that I looked at language and how our language might have nocebo inciting response, right? And because also there have been plenty of studies which have connected language to creating more pain in people. Like, for example, you can put an electric stimulus on someone on their finger, and you can. So there have been studies where you show them words as you give them this small electrical stimulus, if it's a general word, neutral word like cloud flower, they tend to record a certain number. But then if you put a different word in front of them, like burning, painful, or sizzling, they record a higher feeling of pain in their body. And that's just through
Wow.
reading a word, right? So
Wow.
so we can very much conclude that language can have the effect of increasing pain in people, and having these really strange effects of even potentially having symptoms that you wouldn't have normally. So yeah, this can be tied to yoga in the language that we use. So should we go there?
Yeah, yeah, that'd be great. And you write so well about this in the dissertation.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. So um, first of all, the reason I chose to do this topic was because of me observing and hearing these things in classes and through yoga teacher trainings, through other yoga teachers. So things like bending your back in a forward fold can herniate your
Mm-hmm.
disc, for
Mm-hmm.
example. Your spine, if you flex and extend it too many times, can snap like your credit card, or sometimes the image might
Mm-hmm.
be of a twig.
Right.
Uh, and then all forward folds cause hamstring tendinopathy. No, they
Yes.
might. So, and that this is complex because they might contribute to the hamstring tendinopathy, but we cannot say for certain that they cause the hamstring tendinopathy, or the commonly termed yoga butt, right?
Right.
So other claims also, like back bends can ruin your back or rupture discs. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and this one is a controversial one. The foot on the knee in tree pose
Mm-hmm.
can damage your knee.
Mm-hmm. You're never supposed to put your foot on your knee. That's bad.
Yeah, exactly. And I did a little trick like you did. You know how you did the bathroom scales once? So
Yes,
I
Travis gave
put
me that
that,
idea.
I put that between my knee and my foot, and I measured how much force was going into
Oh,
my knee. And it was between,
smart.
I'm here in the UK, so it was in kilos. So it's between 12 and 20 kilos of force. And it was even like pushing. So it'd be like, I don't know, what, 30, 40 pounds or something. And if you think about the amount of force that would go through your knee, so we could say varus force, going through your knee as you're cutting, or in other words, like changing direction quickly, like soccer players would do a lot of, right? That's going to be your whole body weight. So for me, like 70 kilos, 160 pounds, whatever, going through the knee, basically in that horizontal direction, to change my direction to go the opposite way, right? So
Oh.
biomechanics is not my specialty. I'm not Jules Mitchell here, but but I think we can just with common sense figure out the amount of force going through the knee is much less than through other physical activities. And then also you can make the argument that putting a small amount of force like that will make the knee ligament stronger. And there are certain other poses like side plank, which is going to also
Mm-hmm.
put varus force through the knee, especially if we place the foot, into tree pose while we're doing a side plank.
Because side plank is
So
loading in that same plane. It's loading in the
yeah,
frontal plane, just like tree pose on the knee.
yeah. So it's going to be applying that lateral force,
Yeah,
putting
right.
some stress onto the lateral collateral
That's an
ligament.
interesting. So if you go into side plank and go into tree leg with the top leg, that would be a pose that some people
Yeah,
would do,
that's
right?
taught. Yeah,
So it
I like
doesn't
that pose.
matter what doesn't matter in that case whether your foot is on the knee or above the knee. Either way, you're creating varus force, which is the knee bowing out,
Yeah,
That's so.
because the anchor point of your foot is gonna push the foot that way, and then the plant leg foot is gonna be against the ground, and then the tree leg is going to be on the thigh, and you're going to bow the leg out even though the foot isn't on the knee.
yeah. Yeah,
Tra-
exactly. So you're applying
Travis,
that varus force, that force onto the knee. So, but that's okay for some reason. But
do
then
you
Right.
foot
think
on the knee and tree pose is bad.
Travis, is it the same in regular standing up tree? If you put your foot like above
not
or
not
below the
as
knee,
much
it's
just
not the same.
because not as much because there's no lateral force at the foot in the when you're standing vertically as there
Oh,
would
that
be
makes
in
as there would be
side plank.
inside. You're our resident biomechanics expert. Thank you for explaining that. So in tree, okay, yeah, that makes sense. That difference. But in
Yeah,
any
but
case, no.
I think that's one of many examples where there's an inconsistency where people will point out like, "Oh, that's bad," but then you're doing that exact same thing in some
Mhm.
other pose, and nobody worries about it. Like we talked about with shoulder stand and plow.
Right.
It's like, well, nobody talks about plow being dangerous, yet plow's just this exaggerated shoulder stand.
It's like
Yeah.
more than shoulder stand. And for the record, I do feel like I sometimes have heard some fear mongering around plow, but I've heard much more
Okay.
about shoulder stand, and that's the one that I see banned. But plow is shoulder stand times more, like more force and more loads in those same directions people are concerned about.
Yeah, and if
It's
someone has tighter hamstrings, that would cause their spine to even be in more flexion probably, and put, I would say probably
right.
even more load in a flexion direction.
Right. So it's just so inconsistent. I
Anteriorly.
mean, we could make this huge long list of all these inconsistencies in yoga where they're like, don't do this, but then you actually see the exact same biomechanical action or something super similar happening in a different pose, but nobody warns about it. And yet,
Yeah.
maybe it's partly, Matt, due to a lack of high quality anatomy and physiology education for yoga teachers. Like if we don't
Yeah.
understand movement and biomechanics, even on a foundational level, like it doesn't have to be advanced, but just understanding movement, how load is applied to the body in different directions that it's applied. Just that, I mean, if that were taught in like yoga teacher trainings, I think that'll, and pairing that with the idea with not the idea, but the understanding of the laws about how our tissues adapt to load in order to become stronger. Like you pointed out in the beginning of this episode, Matt, with Davis's law, and there's Wolff's law for bone too. But it's like if those two concepts were just taught in all teacher trainings, like the adaptability of our body and how to understand load being applied to the body, like I feel like that would change a lot about some of these potentially problematic fear-based cueing that we hear.
Yeah, it would not just amongst yoga teachers, it would change the world. Because I mean, people with arthritis, they need to be loading their body too. And in
That's
fact, you're going to
right.
have so many studies have found that exercise, loading the body decreases symptoms of arthritis. So,
Yeah,
and 1 in 5 people with arthritis don't do their requirements of exercise. They don't do their 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise and 2 days of strength training per week. And in fact, and they're the same as the general population. Only about 20% of us in both the US and the UK follow those exercise guidelines.
that's
And
right.
with arthritis, I can understand, like, someone thinks, oh, I need to protect myself, but it is the opposite. Like, not only will exercise and loading your body make you feel better, but it will actually help prevent any possible tissue damage, or damage to the
That's
cartilage, or
right.
it can actually uh, improve the cartilage. And arthritis is a basically has to do with the inflammation of the cartilage and potentially wearing down of it. But our bodies are not like cars, where the best thing to do with a car is basically just to not drive it and preserve it. But our bodies
Right.
actually respond really well to stress in a controlled way. It's what Nicholas Salem Taleb, I think his name is. He coined the term anti-fragile, because our bodies
Mm,
are not just robust, which is the opposite of fragile, because robust, if it has too much of a beating, it'll still break and be irreparably damaged. Whereas our bodies are anti-fragile, in that the more we do, the more adapted we become. This is why Olympic athletes uh, do can train twice a day, in the morning and in the evening. For most of us, for me, that would cause injury, and I'd be inflamed and all these sorts of things, right? But if I built up to it progressively, I probably
mm-hmm.
could get there. Yeah. So yeah, the idea of adaptation, or specific adaptations to impose demands, is a really important concept to understand. And pretty much everyone needs to be exercising. And this is another
Mm-hmm.
part of my dissertation. And I should say my dissertation was a coaching resource, which then became a workshop for yoga teachers, which I have produced, and it's on my website, and we can talk about that later. But uh, and I talk about the importance of exercise for people with all kinds of chronic conditions. And there's plenty
Mm,
of really good research showing that actually exercise should be prescribed as medicine, with only a few
Right.
rare instances of rest being needed. For example, someone with a very acute injury, right? So
Right.
they've just been in a car accident, in the recently, obviously, or someone with cancer on chemotherapy and an
Mm,
active infection, they might
hmm.
need some rest. But in most other cases, including what we associate with older age, like arthritis, these people, all of us need to be strengthening, training, and so the good news as yoga teachers, we'll always have jobs. It is
Right.
needed. You need to keep training people and personal trainers, and it's all so valuable. And I used to see a distinction between fitness and yoga, or personal training and yoga and that sort of thing. And
Yeah.
now I just think get people moving, strengthening. It's the best thing they can do. It is incredible, not just for your body, but for your sleep, your cognition, your decreased risk factors
Absolutely.
for cardiovascular disease, cancer. It's incredible. But the what we have as a gift to offer people, movement and exercise, is like a miracle cure, honestly.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for emphasizing that. I think that is a huge message that really can have profound impact. And it's sad and very disappointing that I think you said 1 in 5 or 20% of just the general population actually meets the recommended minimum for exercise. Yet it has so much potential to support us and improve health, and like you said, cognition, and just and psychosocial factors as well. Like there's just so much there. So yeah, we have such an amazing tool in our hands with something like yoga. So it's just unfortunate when something like yoga is just portrayed as being this like dangerous activity that people should avoid, because if anything, it seems like that's potentially creating more barriers to a movement practice that many people, I mean, it's of course, I've never been like every single person should do yoga. I definitely don't think that. Like people should do the activity that resonates for them and that they feel drawn to, whatever that is. But a lot of people do find a ton of satisfaction and meaning in yoga and are super drawn to it. So I think it has a lot of power that way to really
Yeah.
motivate people.
It's
Mm.
frustrating when people put, like you said, put up barriers, especially unnecessary barriers
Yeah.
to things, like when they say that activities like yoga or running are dangerous and are guaranteed to cause you injury and pain, and that we already know that people don't exercise enough or move enough as it
Yes.
is. And so now you're just putting one more like wall up,
Hmm.
or trying, discouraging people from getting active, when inactivity is more of a risk factor for the early death or disease than doing an
Yes.
activity with a low risk of injury.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is like my message to the world. Like
Hmm.
get people moving. We definitely need to get more active, and it's just incredible. And the risk to benefit ratio is outrageous in terms of like the risk of injury or adverse events with not just yoga, but physical activity in general is so
Right.
low in comparison to its
Yeah.
its benefits. And if you want to feel better about teaching yoga, I recommend you watch things like Sheer on Netflix, where these girls are jumping, 30 feet into the air, being caught doing like crazy somersaults and handsprings. Like they don't just do wheel pose; they bounce out of wheel pose and then back up onto the
Right.
feet and keep. Or watch Home Game, another documentary where these people do these calcio storico, historic soccer, it's called, in Florence, Italy, and they literally beat each other up while someone runs with a football to throw it into the goal.
Oh
I
my
mean, those,
God.
yeah, those are like really high risk activities, and yet people are still doing them. And then when you look at yoga, it's like, oh my gosh, how could tree pose be
Well,
dangerous? You're just
Oh
bouncing up
my
on.
God. Could we actually you mentioned a couple of specific claims that we tend to hear a lot in the yoga world that you would suggest are nocebos. Um, and well, like you mentioned tree, and we kind of talked about that one, but there were the one that I was hoping we could go into a little bit more was the proximal hamstring tendinopathy that you had mentioned. That like I have seen tons of claims about this, including a really a widely read article that was in the Huffington Post several years ago. It was called "Stop Stretching Your Hamstrings." That was like the title of it. Like, talk about how negative, like what a negative message that is. But in that article, the author actually made several claims and connected forward folds to disc herniations, but was really talking about You're showing it to us, right? Oh, it's on your slide. I
It's
love
in
it.
my slideshow.
You can't see, if you're listening to this, you can't see this, but Matt just showed us a slide from his slideshow on all of this, and it's featuring an image from this exact article. Travis, I don't know if you've seen. I'll have to send this to you if you haven't seen it. Stop Stretching Your Hamstrings in the Huffington Post. But the author fearmongered about herniating discs from forward folds, intervertebral disc, but also that it gives us proximal hamstring tendinopathy, which, just in case some listeners don't know what that is, that would be like pain, and correct me if I'm defining this incorrectly, but pain felt at the very top of the hamstrings muscles where they attach to the sitting bone, the ischial tuberosity. So that's why it's called yoga butt. It's like that high hamstring pain up in the butt, basically. And in the yoga world, we have this idea that it's very prevalent among yogis and that it's caused by all the forward folds that we do in yoga. I think you guys have heard similar messaging, right? Like that's so then it can kind of scare people away from stretching in general and a yoga practice as well. So Matt, you wrote about this in your dissertation. Could you maybe elaborate on this a bit?
Yeah, 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 absolutely. So I can share a quote from that article that you're talking about if you'd like.
Yes, please.
So the author says, this is a direct quote: "Many people injure their spine and lower backs, tear or inflame hamstring tendon attachments, and even rupture discs doing stretches such as seated and standing forward bends in yoga." After that, I'm scared to do a forward fold, you know?
Totally.
I'm not bending over ever again.
Not even
It's
to
so
pick anything
scary.
up. Okay, and then I've seen other things, and in my slideshow I also pick it up a comment from Instagram. The comment section of Instagram is always a great place to hang out
Yeah,
in.
fun.
And this person says, who's a really well-known yoga teacher says, "When the sits bones lift away from the floor in the forward bend, the stretch goes into the hamstring attachments, which has caused many injuries, the dreaded yoga butt. Keeping the sit bones down keeps the stretch in the belly of the hamstrings." So,
That's great. I think that's
first of all,
very commonly believed in the yoga world.
yeah. Okay, so first of all, there's this claim that yoga causes yoga butt, or this proximal hamstring tendinopathy. Okay, so if you're making a claim, this is an empirical claim, then there needs to be some evidence behind it. So
That is so true.
what evidence do we have? So if we look back to those studies that we mentioned at the beginning, a lot of Kramer studies, is one by Weiss et al. And on Jenni's site, she has a great article by Yari.
Yeah,
What's his name?
Karpinen. You remember.
Karpinen. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Well, that helped my master's, actually. That helped my dissertation.
I'm so
Thanks,
Oh,
right?
Yari will love hearing that. We'll have to tell him.
So, he summarizes the literature that we have on that. And I have looked through the articles, the scientific articles that talk about the systematic reviews on yoga-related injuries or adverse events, and none of them mention hamstrings. So the people who were reporting their injuries didn't mention hamstrings. That wasn't a
just
place.
Forgotten.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but then
I'm kidding.
But that
Yeah,
that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. That doesn't mean it doesn't
Right.
happen. But at least from these studies, and of course they are retrospective and self-reported studies, which have their flaws. Because people forget things, or they may not report things correctly, or they might attribute an injury to yoga and it shouldn't have been. But anyway.
Right.
But anyway, none of these studies. So based on the scientific literature that we have on yoga-related injuries, hamstring tendinopathy is not that high on the list. Actually, it's not on the list at all.
Listed. It's not.
However, anecdotally, I do appreciate that it seems a number of people do come into or seem to have hamstring tendinopathy, proximal hamstring tendinopathy. So that doesn't mean it's not happening, right? But basically, we don't really know. And as for the cause or how to remedy it, we also don't know. And if I can read a couple of things here. So this is from an article in the scientific literature called Proximal Hamstring Tendinopathy, Clinical Aspects of Assessment and Management. So this is by Goom et al. 2016. And they basically looked at all the scientific literature on hamstring tendinopathy and compiled what they thought were the things that we need to know as clinicians. So basically, this is really targeted at physiotherapists, for example. And so here's what they found. First of all, the cause of proximal hamstring tendinopathy involves many factors. Right? So already just there. In other words, how you stretch is not going to cause it in itself, right? It has many factors. One known factor is increasing training volume or intensity too quickly, which that's not surprising. The too much too soon injury, right? And so, yeah, if someone goes from doing no yoga at all to yoga 2 times a day, that is a lot really quickly, too much too soon. And so this is why I'm not surprised when yoga students on a teacher training say, why did I get injured in a teacher training? Because I'm doing yoga every day. Like, I shouldn't get injured. But actually, it's because you've probably gone from doing yoga once a week to now twice a day. And you're putting a lot of load through the hamstring tendons. When hamstrings or when tendons are tensioned, they don't know if they're being tensioned because you're doing good morning exercise at the gym, or you're doing Surya Namaskar, sun salutations, right? They just know that they're being tensioned. So absolutely, yoga might be a contributing factor for someone who's doing too much too soon. Okay, so that's one of the things that the authors found, and a couple other things. They know one. It is not known, they say, if stretching is a factor. And they say this specifically.
It is not known.
It is not known if stretching is a factor. And also, PHT, hamstring tendinopathy, is fairly common amongst runners, but also occurs in sedentary people. That's the funny thing. So you can get hamstring tendinopathy being a runner, but you can also get it just sitting down and doing nothing. Right? So prevalence among yoga practitioners basically is unknown. So yeah, we have the anecdotal suggestions that it might happen more in yoga, and maybe it does. And honestly, we need more research on the matter. But it's, I would say, pretty much impossible that one small thing, like whether you have your flesh of the buttocks underneath you or not, is going to be the thing that affects whether you develop this hamstring tendinopathy or not. And it could very much be a matter of too much too soon. Maybe you need to tone it down, reduce your forward folds, reduce your hamstring stretches. And someone can certainly make the argument that we do a heck of a lot of hamstring stretching and not strengthening of the hamstrings, or not equal stretching of other muscles. Like, we don't really stretch our quadriceps that much in yoga. But we do a lot of hamstring stretching. So the point is that I think there's a lot of nuance to this argument, and it's not as simple as do this one small trick and your hamstring tendinopathy will go away, or it will never happen. And we just don't have the evidence to support that claim. And as you say, sadly, it can create fear in people. So let's just be cautious with our language. Just get people moving and do things if they feel good. Don't do it if it doesn't feel good, kind of thing.
Can you speak to that fear a little bit? So someone reads that article, they are convinced that this is stretching their hamstrings is going to cause them this injury. Like, what are the ramifications of that?
So and this is where maybe the nocebo effect can take a hold, and so when we have expectations of pain or not of pain, this can have physiological effects, and physiological processes can occur. So for example, when we feel good, when we're happy, we're exercising, we get a release of built-in painkillers known as endogenous opioids. You've probably heard of endorphins. So this hormone or neurotransmitter that's associated with exercise and feeling good. And what's really interesting is that's short for endogenous morphine. Endorphins is endogenous, so built inside the body, morphine.
No
And
way.
morphine is pretty much the same chemical structure as heroin, street heroin. So what's fascinating is
Wow.
we have this drug cabinet in our brain releasing the right amount of hormones and neurotransmitters when needed, and an increase in our expectations can increase the positive ones or increase the negative ones. So these neurotransmitters, such as also serotonin, will reduce pain signals in the body, or nociceptive signals, I should say. That would be a better way of saying it. And so if someone has decreased serotonin, which is known to be associated with depression, you will receive more input into your central nervous system, more nociceptive input, and you're more likely to interpret general sensations as pain. And an extreme example of this, it's called, I think it's complex regional pain syndrome, where it develops that just the brush of a feather on someone's arm can create searing pain. It's because the body has kind of had a little faulty mechanism in how it interprets sensations. So our expectations can affect our release of hormones and the sensations that we feel in our body. So does that kind of answer that question?
Yeah. So I think people could experience pain where they otherwise might not have, or could avoid doing something because they're fearful of creating that pain when that's unnecessary. So like maybe their hamstrings didn't hurt before when they were forward folding, but now that they know that this is a guarantee, a foregone conclusion that if they forward fold, they're going to develop this proximal hamstring tendinopathy, now they start experiencing
They're like
pain.
primed to feel pain there.
Yes, yeah, and you guys are touching on something known as kinesiophobia, which I'm sure you're familiar with. Kinesis being movement, phobia, fear. And so if we tell someone, don't do this, this will injure you, it can foster kinesiophobia in a person. And there was a really interesting study by Lack et al. In 2015, finding that kinesiophobic beliefs can rub off onto others. So they basically had physiotherapists, and they found which physiotherapists were more kinesiophobic, so more cautious with their language, who would say, be careful doing this, don't lift too much, that sort of thing. You don't want to wear and tear your body. Those are all kinesiophobic beliefs. So they took a group of kinesiophobic physiotherapist students and non-kinesiophobic physical therapy students, and they basically just had those students then just guide a made-up client, in a lifting task. They just said, okay, lift as much as you can onto this table. And basically what the researchers found is that kinesiophobic beliefs rub off. So the clients of the kinesiophobic physios lifted 32 kilos onto a table, whereas the non-kinesiophobic physios guided their clients to lift close to 40 kilos. Right. So a substantial difference. And this is normalized for age and sex and all that sort of thing. And so the kinesiophobic physios, physical therapists, guiding kinesiophobic clients had the lowest lifts, which is not surprising. So if you get someone in your class who's already a bit afraid to move, a bit afraid to do flexion, and then you're also afraid to do flexion, between the two of you're more likely to create these kinesiophobic beliefs and create fear, which actually can potentially lead to more injury. So
that's like the cycle, fear, avoidance, belief. What's it called? But it returns on itself. So the more fearful you are, the less you do. Less you do, potentially, the more pain you feel, and then it just goes back and around.
Exactly. The fear avoidance model of pain, I think it's called. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So it can have this cyclical effect.
That's really profound, I think, for yoga teachers. And
Hmm.
granted, we're extrapolating, like you said, research on physiotherapists and
That's
patients
right.
to a yoga context, but I think it's safe to say that your beliefs as the yoga teacher will affect your students' experiences, and also maybe their beliefs if they're, especially if they're repeat students, students
Right.
that you're interacting with often. So you have to be mindful of that. And if you're spreading these sorts of messages, that they can have negative effects.
I think there's
Hmm.
also the level of a yoga teacher teaching to a group class, like a whole group of students, versus like a yoga student coming up to their yoga teacher after class or before class and saying, like, oh, hey, I'm experiencing this pain. And I think we know that a lot of like the general public do see yoga teachers as like an authority on the body. And some of them even like blur these lines and think of them as healthcare practitioners, which they're not. Like yoga teachers are not, but I see these lines kind of
Yeah,
blurred in the
yoga
yoga world.
students all the time ask yoga teachers about pain issues that they're having in their body.
Yeah.
And yoga teachers, well, in my experience, when I've been witness to this, yoga teachers will often
Give
give
advice.
advice in those
Yeah.
situations.
Like,
Sometimes the advice is fine, and sometimes the advice is maybe not as fine. And
when it's like the yoga teacher trying to diagnose or treat that pain, like this is what you have, or what, that's crossing a line. But in the sense that yoga students could look up to a teacher as an authority in a similar way. And again, I'm kind of drawing like we don't really have evidence to support that yoga teachers can necessarily change yoga students' beliefs, but I
it's
I just
not
think there are different
far-fetched.
levels. Yeah, there's a level of the group class, and then there's a level of a single student talking to a teacher specifically about their problem.
But both situations would be instances where yoga teachers' beliefs could
Mm-hmm.
rub off on their students.
Yeah.
It seems
And then,
plausible.
yeah. But then that leads us to the question of what do yoga teachers do? What should they say? Should we go there? Because
Yeah, yeah.
and
Yeah,
this is where I go towards the end of of my
this is
uh,
great.
of my dissertation and my workshop for yoga teachers, because you think, okay, I know what I shouldn't say, and I know to be careful about using fear-based language, but what can I say?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
I would say one of the first things is just say less.
Hmm.
And we're there. Think of what we're there to do. Our scope of practice. We are there to guide movement, and that's it, right?
That's
So
right.
all you have to do, basically, on the most basic level, you say triangle pose. Cool, great job. Revolve triangle, and basically
Hmm.
let people self-organize. And I'm not saying that's not the only thing you should do, but there's no problem in using reassuring language
Yeah.
and encouraging people. And as yoga teachers, I think we should be like the number one cheerleader for the people in the room in front of us. And yeah, if someone's having pain, trust that they will know to back off. And unless you are physically manipulating that person, you
Mm.
are not causing an injury to them by suggesting that they do a pose like Wild Thing. You are just offering that suggestion. And I think it can be very wise to offer other options
Hmm.
also. Like if this pose isn't right for you, go for another one, right? But we can say the same thing or something similar without inputting that fear-based language. Um, and there's nothing wrong with being positive, saying positive things and inform people that basically all musculoskeletal injuries resolve themselves. Like 90% of low back pain resolves itself within 6 weeks. That's a nice statistic to know. And yeah, take it easy a bit today, but see how you go.
I really like what you said about saying less. Jenni has a good, I don't know where this is, if it's on YouTube or whatever, but the yoga teachers will say dorsiflex your ankle in pigeon to protect your knee, right?
Oh, right.
And well, you don't need to do that. It just
It
doesn't,
doesn't
it's
protect your knee.
not, doesn't matter. And then yoga teachers will say, well, what should I say instead? Say less.
Yeah, just
If
say
you want
nothing.
people to dorsiflex their ankle, dorsiflex their ankle. Go to town. It doesn't matter. But like just leave off the to protect the knee part, because we don't have to say that. We don't have to create that, little thing in the back of
Hmm.
somebody's mind where, oh, I need to do something to protect something else.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one of the things in that I say to not say, like to protect such and such a body part.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can tell people to engage their abs, yeah, and it might be a good idea if you're doing something like a handstand or a back bend, right, or drop back.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't need, but then take off to protect your back.
Yes.
Engage your
To
abs to
protect your
protect your back.
spine.
Right, because
Yeah.
it creates this, oh, well, my back needs protecting. My back is
Mm.
fragile.
Mm-hmm. And as we
Yeah.
know,
And sadly, going back to the how I mentioned qualitative research, there's a really great study by Ben Darlow et al. 2013. He looked at the language that clinicians, the enduring impact of language that clinicians have on their patients. And there's one anonymous person, a lady with chronic non-specific low back pain, and she says, um, basically, I've been told by physiotherapists and Pilates teachers, she specifically said Pilates, that I have a ridiculously weak core and I need to keep working my core. And trigger warning about abortion, she said, I actually had an abortion because I didn't believe I could hold the weight. I couldn't hold a baby because I'd been told my core is so weak. And that is,
oh,
yeah, that's really sad. And that is very much the end of the spectrum, and
it's extreme.
but that does show that definitely our words can have an effect. And so I think yoga teachers want to be on the safe side, but if you want to be on the safe side, and so they're saying things like to protect your knee, to protect your back. But actually, if you want to be on the safe side, just avoid saying those things. Just get people moving,
Exactly.
let them trust their bodies, give them options, and remember that you are there to suggest movement to people.
Mm-hmm.
And the more you know, the better you do. We learn more and we do better, I think. And even you've talked about this on another one of your articles, Jenny, about pushing into pain. And actually, the
Oh,
research shows
yeah.
that people who push into pain during exercise don't have greater pain in general. So their basis of pain, their base level of pain, does not increase as a result of pushing into painful exercise. And in fact, it tends to decrease in general, right?
Right.
Now we're getting onto a fine line here of
Mm-hmm.
should I encourage people to push through pain? And that's a very fine line. But at the same time, I think it's important to know that even if someone experiences strong sensations or which can go towards pain, that's not even necessarily a bad thing, right? But
Yeah.
obviously that's a very fine line, and that's very nuanced, and that's really
Yes.
a case by case basis. But it's
100%.
much simpler than if you feel any pain, stop.
That's right. And
There was
creating.
a
Sorry, go on, Travis.
there was a study a couple of years ago on hamstring rehab, hamstring strain injuries. They had one group push into a little bit of pain and one group not. They were hoping to find that the group that pushed into pain would get better faster, but they found no difference between the two groups. Basically,
Mm-hmm.
the two groups returned to sport at the same rate, whether they pushed into a little bit of pain or not. So that just goes to show that it was safe, or there was no downside to exercising into a little bit of pain. It was like a 4 out of 10 maybe. And
Mm-hmm.
again, like that was different from teaching a yoga class, but it just goes to show that it's not, doesn't have to be as scary as we maybe have been trained to think pain is, or
Absolutely.
dangerous.
Yeah. And a message I like to share with teachers, just humans in general, is that your body is amazing, strong, resilient, robust, anti-fragile, Like even your
Yeah.
sacroiliac joint, it is really tightly held together through its form, its shape, all the ligaments that hold it together. Your spine is really strong.
You
And
mean
it
it's
doesn't
not this, the SI joint's not out of place?
it
I'm
doesn't
And
not
go out.
twisted. My
we don't
pelvis isn't
stretch.
twisted.
Oh my God.
Yeah, exactly. Even the knee joint, where yeah, we do see more injuries in the knee joint, but even still, that's still a strong structure. And
Right.
loading it, exercise, and all that sort of thing can help make it stronger. So let's not be fearful of the body. Trust the body, and also let people make their own decisions. They are, after all, the
Mm-hmm.
authority over their own body about how much they want to
I
push.
I really I value that, and I think that we can give people more information and let people decide, as
Yeah.
opposed to, well, I'm just trying to keep my people safe, so I'm not going to let them do X, Y, or Z. It's like, no, let people know, educate them, let people know the value, the risks, the benefits, and then let them decide for themselves.
Yeah.
Right,
If we never
empower
did
them.
anything risky, we wouldn't have the limbo queen. You can Google her. She can limbo under a car carrying 2 trays of coffee, right?
Oh,
So we
what?
wouldn't have circus. We wouldn't have cheerleading if people did nothing risky. We wouldn't have skiing. We wouldn't have handstands. Handstands, and the Kramer research and all those other people, they did find handstands did have a higher risk of injury. I think you guys talked about that too in your
I
injury
think we
episode.
did, yeah.
But that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. Like, just because something has a higher risk, that needs to be considered with the benefits of it. Like, it's amazing balancing in handstand. I definitely
It
want to teach more
is.
people do
You have a
that,
whole
even though I
workshop.
know the risks.
But it's so true. It's so true. I think there's so much value in practicing something fun like handstand. Not to say that everyone should do it, but there's so much confidence building and empowering, and it's fun. And I think we know there's a lot of inherent value when we treat movement in a way that is fun and playful. Like perhaps more learning happens, and there can even be more benefits that we glean from, being super serious about everything. But in any case, I think this is a really great way that you kind of wrap up your presentation, and you do, rather than just telling everyone, what you'd recommend they don't do, you can actually end on something positive. And as you're educating people about like our words can be powerful as yoga teachers, and we kind of focus on how they might be powerful in that negative way. But on the flip side, one way we potentially could help people is by being positive in our words. So we can kind of direct maybe the effects that they have on people in an intentional manner when we understand some of these broader concepts. So I wonder, Matt, with your coaching resource that you created, that your dissertation is based on, is that something that you offer? Like, do you teach that online? Could you drop into other people's teacher training programs and offer that, like if people were interested?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a 3-hour course. So my dissertation was basically the proposal for this workshop or this 3-hour course, and now I've made that course into fruition. I offered online sometimes, and I recorded it online, and it's available on my website for sale for £25. So
Oh
I'm
wow,
here
people
in
can buy it. Cool.
yeah. So I'm here in the United Kingdom, so we do pounds. Um, so yeah, for £25, it's an online recording of that workshop. It's about 3 hours in length. My website is matthewhui.com.
Hmm.
And then I'm on Instagram as Yoga with Matt. So you can find links to it there
Yeah,
under
and we'll put
online workshops.
links to all this in the show notes so people can refer there
Cool.
That's so
Yeah.
great. So you do oh, sorry.
And that's so it's targeted right now as a continuing education module for yoga teachers who are already, they've already done a 200-hour.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
is that the
Yeah, it is.
background knowledge that you're assuming?
Yeah. Yeah. But it could also be tied into a teacher training towards the end
Got
of the
it.
teacher training. Yes.
I
But
think
you do
any
need to know a tendon from a ligament. So you need to have some
right.
basic knowledge.
I think any yoga teacher training program, whether it's the 200-hour or like the 500-hour level, I think any of them would be super lucky to have you, Matt. Either you like live present this or to incorporate the recorded course. But I think something you point out in your dissertation is like everything we've talked about today, this whole concept of like fear-based language and the potential negative effects it could have. That doesn't seem to be a required topic to be included in yoga teacher training programs, at least by these bodies like the Yoga Alliance, and there's IAYT, International Association of Yoga Therapists, is another one. But it seems like these general bodies that kind of dictate their recommendations for yoga teacher training, it doesn't seem that this actually very important topic is prescribed to be included. So like your course really fills a need and a hole out there.
Yeah, I don't know anything like it. My
Mm-hmm.
colleague Andrew McGonigal, who I love,
Mm-hmm.
shout out to Andrew, and he's brilliant. He has a similar course on language, but his is for yoga teachers about language, but it's focused more on using gender neutral language.
Oh, I've seen him
And
talk about some of that stuff.
yeah, and in inclusive language, making yoga
Mm-hmm.
more accessible and that sort of thing. So we both think about language, but in a different way. Like mine more towards like injuries, beliefs, fear, and then his towards more inclusivity.
It's great.
But
And
otherwise, there are some resources for like physical therapists, but I don't know of anything like this for yoga teachers. And my hope, my aim is to make yoga teachers feel more confident to go out and help people, because like it is such an incredible thing that yoga can offer to people, to the world. And
yeah,
if we're just stilted with fear, then we can't be offering our best service. So uh,
100%.
yeah, so I hope that people go about the world with less fear as a result of learning with me or somewhere else, or just learning on your own.
And as much as your 3 hour course fills this hole or this obvious need in the yoga world, another thing that you're involved in that I also feel fills a hole and a need in the yoga world is the book that you co-wrote with Andrew, who you just mentioned a moment ago. But the two of you have written this brand new book that just released called The Physiology of Yoga. I mentioned it back in the intro, but Travis and I have both had a chance. We've been lucky enough to preview it, and it's beautiful and so thorough, super cited. Actually, I counted this morning before we got on. I wanted to see how many citations you included in it, and it's like over 130 scientific references that you included in your book, The
Oh,
Physiology of
wow.
Yoga. I don't know if you knew that.
No,
But
I
just
didn't.
to,
No, yeah.
yeah, so just we were talking earlier about like a lot of common maybe yoga anatomy textbook. And this isn't anatomy, this is physiology, but a lot of common like yoga anatomy or physiology books that yoga teacher training programs prescribe, like the biggies in the yoga world these days. Aside from Jules Mitchell's yoga biomechanics, which is about stretching, aside from that, they don't. And you mentioned that Bernie Clark does have a book that does include citations, but the rest of them don't. It doesn't seem to be common practice. Like if you just name any of the big yoga anatomy or physiology books. So I feel like your book offers and fills this big need, which is like a thorough introduction to physiology, which is different than anatomy and different than biomechanics. And it's something that I find not to be covered in very many yoga teacher training programs. But I think, just at least a surface understanding of all the subsystems of the body, how they integrate and work together as a whole, is really valuable for really anyone with a body, but especially yoga and movement teachers. So I'm super excited about your book. I'm really glad it's available on the market. And I actually think, honestly, I think your book, your Physiology of Yoga, you're in Andrews, and then Jules's Yoga Biomechanics, like those two, and then something that's just anatomy, like just really good, solid anatomy. Those three would be like an excellent like trio of core, this is just my opinion, but core books for yoga teacher training programs. So thank you for writing that and putting it out there. And do you have, if you don't know the website in this moment, we'll just be sure to put the URL in the show notes so people can find your book. But do you know, Matt, where it'll be? It's published by Human Kinetics.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
on
So you can get it.
Amazon.
Yeah, so you can get it through Amazon, through Human Kinetics, and we have a website. Um, to be honest, which we're building. So,
You're building it.
or my lovely partner Saz is building. So it's I think it's yogaphysiology.com, and or is it
Great.
physiologyofyoga.com? And maybe you link to the show note in
We'll
the
put
show
it in the
notes.
show notes, the correct
So
one.
this is a
We'll
landing
link both.
page.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll confuse people.
Some other person with that other URL will get a few hits.
yeah, exactly. I really should have prepared for this. So, and it's a landing page with links to my website, Andrew's website, and then how to buy the book and that sort of thing. And yeah, as you said really well, the book goes through each system of the body, or most of the
Hmm.
systems of the body, from the musculoskeletal to the digestive. And we talk about the basic anatomy and physiology of that system, and then common ailments related to it, and then also how yoga might affect that system based on the latest research. So in the cardiovascular system, we're going to look
Hmm.
at, for example, does yoga reduce blood pressure, like I mentioned at the
That's
beginning,
right.
right? And then we also have a really interesting sidebars of myth or fact, and we
I
talk
I
love
about
love
those.
those.
a common claim in yoga, such as do twists detoxify the body, right? And so we
Hmm.
look at the physiology and anatomy and reasoning behind that. Um, so yeah, I think it is a valuable addition, and it really ties knowledge of anatomy and physiology specifically to yoga, and that's where it's unique. So yeah, I'm really
Absolutely.
glad you guys enjoyed it. Thank you. It was a labor of love. It took a lot of time. I have a permanent imprint on the sofa of where I sat between my dissertation,
Between the two
and
of
writing the
them.
book.
At
Yeah,
least you were
Yeah.
exactly.
comfortable.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I love that. Yeah, well, thank you to you and Andrew for putting this resource together and all the work and time and effort I know you put into it. I just think it's a really valuable contribution to the yoga world and for all of our education in general. So yeah, we recommend our audience definitely check the book out and just check Matt's work out in general and this course that we've kind of talked about throughout this whole episode today. You can see he has a super evidence-based, positive and empowering message to share with the yoga
Yeah.
world. And I just feel really lucky we got to talk to you about all of this today,
Thank
Matt.
you. And then the last thing,
Oh yeah.
beyond my learning, also like Google Scholar, check it out, and go type in
Mm-hmm.
yoga injury, yoga adverse events. And I used to be scared of these scholarly articles. I remember
Mm-hmm.
2 years ago, but it's not as bad as you think. And there will be terms you won't recognize, especially with more complex physiology. But I do recommend that we just start reading scientific literature. And it's honestly, especially about yoga related injuries, it's really easy to read. And that will only
Right.
help scientific literacy, like you were talking about at the beginning, Jenny. So
I
empower
think that's a
yourself.
great
Yeah.
point. And
Mm-hmm.
to what you said, it will be a little scary at first, right? But you get
Mm-hmm.
better with practice. So it's hard the first few studies you read. It's new and different from what you read on the New York Times or whatever else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you get used to it and you start to learn those words. You look up the words, and then the next time you see them, they're more
Mm-hmm.
familiar, and you build more confidence and experience doing it, and then it becomes less scary over time.
Yeah. It opens this whole world of information, which is incredible. I mean, you can learn about yourself by learning about anatomy and physiology and psychology. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that's why I operate like that. Oh, that's why I
Right.
feel more depressed after I don't have enough sleep. Like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. Okay, I'll make sure I go to bed earlier today, rather than ruminating on this idea like, oh, I'm feeling horrible today. So
Right.
yeah, our it can help us in our life very much. So there's nothing like learning. I love it.
Absolutely. Thank you for making that last point. Yeah, definitely recommending that. Yeah, people actually dive into the research themselves and there's so much to be gained from that. And I can just tell how much that's really informed and excited you, Matt, and it clearly permeates all of your work.
Yeah. Oh,
So,
thank you. Thank you.
yeah. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you, Travis, for being here. And I think this conversation, I'm really excited for people to listen to this. I think there was a lot of great information shared.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you both. Please keep up the good work because you're doing amazing, and we yoga teachers need it. So great work, both of you.
Thanks, Matt. And
Thanks,
thanks,
Matt.
Jenni.
Thank you.